Welcome to this special live edition of the Policing Matters podcast on policeone.com. I'm your host, Jim Dudley. Today, we're here to talk about officer wellness and how to build an effective wellness program. This podcast is part of Lexipol's First Responder Wellness Week, which is designed to support, raise awareness, and to promote strong self-care among public safety workers. You can find out many more resources online at policeone.com. In 2022, the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Office in Central California received the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's Destination Zero Officer Wellness Award. Joining me here today is Stanislaus County Sheriff Jeff Dirkse and Sergeant Aaron Costello to talk about the program and share their advice on steps to success. We will touch on the importance of implementing a culture of wellness from the top down, the key components of a comprehensive wellness program, and strategies to incentivize employee participation. First, a little background on our guests. Sheriff Dirkse began his career in law enforcement in 2007 with the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department, serving in patrol and as a detective. He was sworn into office as the Sheriff Coroner in January 7th, 2019. Sergeant Aaron Costello began his law enforcement career in 2003 with the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department, and he's also worked patrol and as a detective in the gang unit. He was promoted to sergeant in 2013. Welcome, Sheriff Dirkse and Sergeant Costello.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Hey, congratulations on your recognition and in building something that is so important to individuals within law enforcement organizations today. What was the impetus for starting the program?
Well, you kind of covered my history very briefly. I spent a lot of time in the military before I got into law enforcement. And when I originally ran for sheriff 4 years ago, I'd looked at our department in my time here, and while a number of our staff was fit, like there are ways that we can do this better. And kind of coming from that military background where there's annual PT tests and a variety of physical requirements, I think that is a good model for us to mirror. And so that the physical side of it was really the original intent 4 years ago. But as we really got into this more and more, we also realized the need for that mental and emotional side, the mental well-being. And that the whole, as we had a lot of conversations around that, was one of my 4 main initiatives, became this idea of wellness. Some aspects we already had, and some we needed to bring to the table. That's kind of what started it. And the interesting thing that I found is in my conversations with the community and various folks across our county, our citizens were also deeply concerned about our wellness. And it really resonated with them that we wanted to go down this road. And that I thought was very important because it really benefited, the goals that we were trying to achieve.
Yeah, it's great. It's so great to have the community concern and support. Can you tell us a little bit how the program is structured?
Yeah, so we have a variety of different things that we offer. And I'll start by saying the physical side is much easier than that mental side for a variety of reasons, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But the very first thing that we brought on board was an athletic trainer, and her name is Danielle. She has some staff, and they, so most people are familiar with an athletic trainer. They see sports or whatnot, you get taped up and so on. They can do that, but that's not really what they do. They're really more like a physical therapist. You go in with an achy shoulder, back pain, whatever the issue is, and they poke, prod, manipulate, stretch. I always kind of tell people, oh, it's like a massage, but you're going to leave crying, because that's a fairly accurate a statement. And that was the first thing that we brought in, and that was very, very well received. I mean, because in our profession, right, regardless of whether you work in a custodial facility or out on the streets, everybody has kind of physical ailments after a while. Next, we added a nutritionist, right? We had folks that wanted to gain muscle, lose fat, whatever. So we brought in a nutritionist, and we added a CrossFit training provider. We also changed some policies internal to our organization to open up our main gym at our training center 24/7, 365 for all staff. They can just swipe their key card, go use it. Previously, that was not the case. So those were the first things that we brought on board, specifically around the physical side. Subsequently, we added a yoga provider, Warrior Yoga, out of one of our towns. And they originally came on site, as did our CrossFit provider, and that has morphed, and we can talk about that in a little bit. And we've also added another gym that not CrossFit centric. It's really probably targeted more like our civilian staff, the folks that they really don't want to do CrossFit or get super strong. They just want to be healthier, maybe lose some pounds. It's really kind of targeted at that group. We also now the last step, and Aaron, jump in if I've forgotten something. We've also created what we call the open mat, and it's on a Sunday, and folks can basically go do combatives, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, whatnot. We pay our instructors to be there, but it's open to all staff, and it can be a great workout. It's training, but not training. But we open that staff, other than the instructors, does not get paid to attend that. But they can just go and work on their skills. So I don't know, Aaron, did I miss anything? I think that's everything we have now.
Yeah, that's about it.
And then we also have more on the mental side, we have our peer support. We have the department shrink that's available to staff. We have our chaplains. We have all of that as well. But like I said, that piece is just much more difficult to address.
Yeah, so it sounds like you cover all the bases, and maybe we're going a little bit back in time to when people went through the academy. Sheriff, we train people when they come in. They take a physical agility test. They come in, and we try to build them up for the job. But then a lot of agencies tend to drop the ball afterwards and say, "Hey, you're on your own after this." It's great to hear your program. I'm starting to hear more from athletic trainers. Tracy Toffner from Wisconsin's doing a terrific job out there. We talk about fitness standards and the need and why we shouldn't drop them. And actually, you're going rather than reactive when an officer gets hurt to being proactive and building up that strength to prevent them from being hurt.
Yes, very much so. I like the idea of what I call the tactical athlete. It's a common term. I did not come up with it, and because really that's what we are. Again, regardless of what capacity you work, streets, in a facility, whatever, our folks are tactical athletes. Sadly, this week we have the shooting in Nashville, Tennessee, but you see those responding officers, that took some fitness, right? They had to get from their car, it's high stress, moving upstairs, down hallways, did not appear to be exceptionally long, but you've got to be able to accomplish that. And then when you get there, you've got to be able to finish that fight. Obviously, in this case, it involved a weapon. But what if that turned into some sort of an actual physical altercation? You've got to be able to get there and finish that fight. So pushing that idea of that tactical athlete, because that's what we are, I think is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And oftentimes it's not so difficult to get people to buy into a physical workout. Hey, we're going to allot you some time on duty to get in the gym, get strong, work on the mat, develop some new skills. But now, certainly there remains that stigma related to the mental health issues that you alluded to. How did you overcome that in particular?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is much, much harder to get people to buy into this idea of their own mental health. And it comes in a variety of facets. So from where I sit as the sheriff, obviously I deal with a lot of our IAs, the internal affairs investigations, the punishment, if you will. And not always, but regularly, when I see someone who comes in, for some sort of on-duty or potentially off-duty conduct that has gotten them in trouble, I can look back in their history if I know them reasonably well and say, oh, that stems from the divorce 2 years ago, or from financial issues 2 years ago. They developed a drinking problem, and now they showed up to work drunk, or whatever. And so if we that mental side of it, if we can address some of those issues that are creating the stress in their life, that may prevent them from ever, kind of having to come in and face any kind of discipline. Doesn't mean they won't get divorced or something like that, but if we could help them, or at least provide the services for them to navigate those life issues more successfully, that will make them a better employee, a better person, and a better responder for our community. But kind of specifically to the question of how do you handle it, I will tell you, it takes it, I think, from the top down to just destigmatize it and tell people it's okay. It's okay that you have an issue from seeing someone who got shot in the head, from a dead baby, from that stressful thing that you encountered. So I was a company commander in Iraq in 2005, and when we redeployed back to the U.S., the military, the Army assigned a shrink, or some sort of a council, I don't know what their actual title was, but to every company that came back. And our guy was just a great guy, former military guy. We kind of connected with him, but every soldier had to go see him. And I would love to say that I did this with all sorts of forethought. I didn't, right? But I stood in front of the company and I said, yeah, we're all going to go do this. And I said, I'm going to go first. And then I walked into the little office that he had in our barracks and sat in there for 10 or 15 minutes with him. And then I left and everybody started to cycle through. But again, that was kind of a random thing, a spur of the moment thing, but that set the tone for all of my soldiers to go into there and then talk about whatever they talked about. I never got reports on that. It's none of my business. But reflecting back on that, it took me as the company commander to destigmatize people talking to him. And I've kind of carried that forward into this profession. And we try to the extent possible, kind of openly acknowledge or praise people. It may be anonymous, but praise people like, hey, we had someone come and see us with a problem. They were afforded certain services, and now they're better. And again, we leave names out of it and so on, but we try to kind of positively reinforce it's okay if you're having an issue, just come and seek help. We work with our unions, all the presidents, like, hey, if you know of someone who has an issue, you can come to us, you can go straight to HR, wherever, you can leave us out of it, but we want them to have help. And so go deal with them so that we're not dealing with them later.
Mm-hmm. And Sheriff, it seems like so many agencies have some sort of early intervention program where we're monitoring calling in sick and vacation and traffic collisions and complaints and use of force and all that. Are you using any of those data sources to reach out to members, or are you reactive and wait for them to come to you?
On the mental health side, excuse me, on the mental health side, I will say we are typically more reactive. But we do kind of encourage our staff, lieutenants and sergeants and so on. If you see someone, the unions, as I kind of spoke to, if they're going to know way better than I am. We're an organization of all said and done with 1,000 people. I'm not going to know if, Smith or Perez somewhere is maybe having an issue. But try to get their chain of command to be on the lookout for that. Again, steer them. But we are more reactive. And I'll tell you, the challenge is we see this regularly. Somebody intervenes with Smith, our mythical Smith, and it's their hesitancy or their pushback. No, I'm fine. I'll be fine. I'm going to take a couple of days off. But they think they're solving the problem, but they're not. They're just kind of kicking the can down the road. Getting them to actually acknowledge it is the hardest part. But those that do, for the most part, our experience has been, if they really say, I have a problem, maybe they have an alcohol issue. Most of them, not all sadly, but most of them have seen pretty good success with getting their problem resolved.
Okay. Hey, Sergeant Costello, Aaron, you are boots on the ground. Oftentimes we create a program at the command level, and then there's maybe somewhere in between, it doesn't really get down to how it should work. How's it working? What's the feedback from line supervisors such as yourself?
It's working. It's working. So, I mean, I would say the program's successful, but I'm kind of going to get philosophical on it. I actually wrote the submission for the Destination Zero Wellness program, and I knew a little bit about our program, but I would say that if you're in the crowd and you want to um, get perspective on where you need to start, I would say mock write your own wellness program. What do you have? What do you need? What do you think you offer? And the more I wrote, the more I talked to people, the more I found that we had. So I've got more the dichotomy of our agency. We had a lot to offer, more than I anticipated. And if you were to do that yourself, then you could probably see what you're not offering. As far as the on the ground goes, I would say in the program, and I'm going to use a cliche saying, you know, Einstein says, if I had a problem to solve, I had 1 hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes on the problem, you know, 5 minutes on the solution. I think that the problem of wellness is a constantly evolving problem. If you're out there and you need to start a wellness program, you've identified that, you start a program, but starting a program is not the same thing as implementing it and then obviously maintaining it. It's a lot harder. And I use the analogy or the perspective of, let's say ours is voluntary, and what we did was we started a wellness program, but what we really want, our end game, is a wellness culture, which is totally different. And if you look at it from an adaptive leadership kind of problem, changing a culture is really hard. And that is how I measure our success. I would say we're very successful, but if I would say that we have 20% voluntary participation, how do I get to 21%? And how do I get to 22? How do I get to 30? How do I get to 50? How do I get to 100? And so that measurement is what I would say. If you're really wanting to get your program more effective, you got to look at it more problematic and keep with it. The fact of the matter is, I dwell in the physical realm a lot. I'm at the gym every day. I'm always trying to find improvements. People don't like being uncomfortable. They like comfort. There's a book the sheriff has in his office called The Comfort Crisis. Talks about how we're adapting to this world of comforts and, you know, nice temperatures and lots of food, and that's not good for us mentally and physically. And getting mass participation is really hard. So if you have a program and you start it, that's great. I say it's a lot harder, it's 10x harder after you've got the program started to maintain and improve it, and to interconnect all these things. So I'd say our program's great. What I would like to see as we move forward is the coordination within. How do we improve our networks between the physical therapists and the nutritionists and the coaching? You know, I think we need a lot more coaches. I think we need a way to motivate people more, and that's absolutely the hardest thing to do. Back to the mental wellness thing, if we have somebody and we're proactive in identifying a future issue, one thing I've noticed about some people we've had who have had issues is if they don't want help, we can only do so much. And so we offer these proactive things and they're not responsive to it. It's really hard. It makes it hard to, that's the most difficult niche of the whole program, is the mental wellness part. And then you can't obviously breach in there, you can't force in there, and then you have unions, and it kind of makes it kind of an interesting challenge to solve. The physical is much easier to look at, but there's a lot more problems to it. In terms of the wellness, I say it's good. I say we have great participation. We have good morale. I'm not happy with it. I want more. I want 50 to 100% participation. I want the gym to be so busy that there's no space to work out. And now we have a new problem, a good problem. And so I've got a ton of information on that I can break down into what I think would be better. Back to this, if you're making a wellness program, and we talk about the tactical athlete, the biggest thing I've learned is there are factions of what people think wellness is. Everybody's got their opinion. If you try to come down with one direct line of this is what wellness is, you're gonna get pushback, right? People like traditional weightlifting, they like CrossFit, they like yoga, and if you can't somehow find a way to appease that group, you're only gonna get a fraction of participation to what you offer. So I think that's one of the bigger challenges, is how do I make this inclusive for everyone?
Yeah, that's great. Oftentimes we'll just implement a program and say, there it goes. Sounds like you're doing a great job assessing and fine tuning. Do you meet regularly? Do you have a group that that does a regular assessment or check-ins with maybe sergeants to see how the program's running?
Aaron, I'm going to punt that one to you.
Yeah, yes and no. And one of the future steps I think we need is to enhance our coordination, is we need that. And one of the things I think of is people love to work out, they're going to go to the gym, but I think there's a huge, the greater part of the iceberg that's underneath the water is people who are afraid to work out. They're afraid to start. They don't know how to start, and they're not forward with it, you know, and some people just are uncomfortable with it. And it's really hard. How do I reach those people? And even though I'll send information out, I see a much deeper coordination. We need this ecosystem of education, support, and it's not mandatory, so it's voluntary. So the next theory I have is we kind of need some ambassadors for the fitness program, like who's a charismatic person in each department and within the department who can motivate and try to get this cultivated, get groups, get the culture change. Because it's really hard for one person just sending out an email to get an effective response and change. And that network, I think, needs to be built up with people who really care about it. I think that's the way it'll be stronger than rather than just directive, you shall do X, Y, and Z. Building that, I think it's just going to take a lot of time.
I got two thoughts on that, Jim, if I could.
Sure.
One, and Aaron already touched on this, that people have different things that they want to do, right? They want to be, iron heads and just go lift. They want to do CrossFit, whatever. Obviously I would say that, like, as the sheriff, if I had my perfect solution, everybody would be kind of that top CrossFit athlete type, right? Very well rounded. They have cardio, they have strength, they have power, mobility, etc. That would be the ideal. But I think that a more realistic goal is keeping everybody healthy or well. And from my standpoint, kind of my official position is, I don't really care what you do. I want you to be fit and healthy. And if you want to run marathons, not my thing, but knock yourself out, right? We have some folks here that are kind of big into cycling. I think that's fantastic, right? We do things to kind of support them in their cycling endeavors. Go forth and do it. If there's some sort of a sport, I don't know if they wanted to have a basketball league, all those things would be great, even though they don't really directly transfer to our job. They are then, if at least they're fit and healthy, that is a huge first step. The other thing that I would say, and Aaron's already alluded to it, and we're in the process, our program has grown over time and gotten bigger and bigger. And we, every time there's a good idea, we try to bring it on board. And so we've talked about, as we've grown, we've added this, that, and the next thing. Here's the problem that we have now. We kind of have different leads on all of it, right? Aaron kind of is on lead on certain parts of it. We have, maybe a captain or a lieutenant who's lead on part of it. And what we lack currently is that coordination and synchronization across the organization. And so we're in the process of trying to hire someone on contract that would be kind of our department's wellness coordinator, and make sure it's well marketed, because like a lot of folks out there, we're hiring people literally every week. So if we're not regularly putting out that information, someone who's been here 3 months or 6 months or a year, right, if they missed an email, they don't even know some of the stuff that we offer. And so you've got to have that, that person that's synchronizing that internal marketing of the program. And for any department, I said earlier, we're about 1,000 all said and done. So I'm sure that there's folks on here from much larger organizations and probably smaller organizations. You need to look at your organization and the size of it, and do you need a full-time coordinator to run with this, or can it be, an additional duty for an officer, a deputy, a lieutenant, a sergeant, whatever the rank may be. That's something that you've got to figure out. You've got to pin the rose on one person, though, and we've grown out of that, and so we're trying to put that back together.
That's great. So many, we're seeing chaplains and family support. Are you doing any outreach to the families of your personnel?
The short answer to that, I'm going to say, is no. But it has been a topic that we have talked about in a number of times. And so, obviously, as the sheriff, I'm fairly active in a variety of things across the community and within the organization. But my wife is my sidekick. She comes to all sorts of stuff. But she tells me too, it's like, we have to crack that code of, like, how do we get information out to spouses, significant others, whatever the case may be, because it's like, if you don't tell me about something, how am I supposed to find out about it? Now, she's, again, fairly tied in here. She's actually a volunteer for us, but so she can get it kind of directly, but you say Aaron's wife, if he doesn't go home and tell her, she may not ever know that there's a picnic, a service, something that's offered, unless he says it. So we've got to come up with a way to distribute the information to the families or significant others as well. And I'll be honest, we have not cracked that code yet. We've talked about closed Facebook groups, other, mass emails, but separate discussion. I hate email with a passion, but I typically delete half of them. And I'm afraid that staff does that too. So we've got to come up with a better way of getting that information out there.
Yeah. Hey, room to grow. So Sheriff, you are clearly the leader in your organization. What did you have to do to convince people outside, the external people, maybe your budget people, your city council, the mayor, or the union? How did you get their buy-in?
Actually, our union, we'll start with the union. They were very supportive. All of our various, we have kind of 4 main unions or associations that represent our various actual law enforcement staff. They were very supportive. We've not had any pushback from them. The only place where there was question and concern was like, hey, if I go see the athletic trainer, is that getting reported that I have an ache or a pain? The answer to that is no. We still fight that stigma at some level. People get wrapped up with, I don't want admin to know that my something hurts. So we do still deal with that, but that was really the only place where we had to have real conversation with our associations. For most of what we did, I didn't ask anybody's permission. I just did it. When it came to contracting with folks and so on, and I have to follow all the various county rules and so on. But yeah, literally within my budget, we just absorbed it. And that no one has ever questioned that. And the easy sell for that is when we talk to recruits or people that are applied or looking, it is a huge recruiting tool as well. Like, oh, I can do this, I can do that on duty, I have free access to that. Oh, heck yeah, I'm applying there, or that's why I applied here, or whatever. The one place where we really had to work with our CO and board to get funding is we have a wellness incentive as well. Simply put, you can take a physical fitness test once a year. It's either the basic post-physical agility test that everybody had to take to graduate from the academy and become a cop. If you pass that, you get $500. And if you pass the SWAT PT test, which is harder, you get $1,000. And it's just paid once a year, every year. And if you do one, we typically offer it like March and September. If you pass, say the basic post in March and get in better shape and pass the SWAT in September, you get the $500 difference. So obviously that was a specific funding request, and our board approved that. And it applies to, in our organization, we have 2 classifications of deputy sheriff and deputy sheriff custodial. They're different classifications, but it applies across the board to both sides. And so that has been very helpful. That was really the only thing that I had to actually negotiate with anybody over.
All right. Makes sense. Fitness bonus. You've talked about the feedback, generally good. Aaron, you talked about the line, people loving it. Any challenges or all good?
Yeah, there are still challenges. I like to think that what makes a good encounter is, the convenience that our gym provides, or what we offer to them, and then obviously diversity in what we offer. And it's good, and the more you feed them little things, the more they want. And so I think one thing that's really important for whoever's over there wanting to develop a wellness program is you kind of got to be on the trending with what's trending, and on the leading edge of technology and fitness. If you follow Instagram, you follow anything, there's all these new things coming out specifically for science and physical wellness. Mobility is a huge thing that wasn't around, and it's our physical therapists teach it. And I've been using a lot of mobility, and it's a game changer. Being a typical SWAT guy with a broken back from carrying heavy stuff to doing these weird hip stretches, and now my pain's almost gone. And there's these emerging trends. So I think if you're addressing your program, you need to listen to what people are saying, but you also need to be innovative in how you see stuff. And the reason I'm underlying that is longevity, I think, is a big goal. And I don't mean longevity for the program, but I mean longevity for my 23-year-old officer who has to retire at 57. How do you do a wellness program that addresses their longevity and their wellness, so when they retire, they're still ambulatory, right? They can walk, they don't have any severe issues, and they're mentally well. And so is your program sustainable, and is there a longevity element? And like some of the trending things that are coming out right now in science is sauna exposure, cold exposure. We're talking about heat shock, cold shock proteins, things that are really supposed to help with things that we've never considered before. And they're really out of the blue, kind of out of the box kind of thinking. And how do you provide those solutions? Those are the problems, the challenges that I kind of stew on. Like, how do I provide that? Well, I'm going to try to get a cold tub. They're expensive. So you got to have the right stakeholders involved, and you got to have the logistics to get that done. But those are some of the things that, people want to see. I've had more people interested in sauna than any other piece of equipment I've brought to the gym. It's kind of interesting. My greatest success in this department was getting a coffee machine in the break room. You can do other things with the coffee machine. So people are fickle when it comes to this kind of program. But I would say that longevity, and then another thing that we've noticed that is the retirees. When someone's been here for 20, 30 years and they retire, they feel like they don't get any help. Like, what's the exit plan? How are they not prepared for that exit plan? You talk about the medical after the retirement and all these different, how you're going to get your retirement funds and all. There's a lot there that can be provided. That's also a wellness factor because you're taking care of that employee. And I think that's another area we need to address, because some retirees have complained that I didn't know how to do this. How do I do this? What do I do after I retire? And that's another component. So I think big picture and innovation and imagination are key to having a fluid program.
Yeah, and I would add to that, for any department that's looking to start one, start somewhere, right? And just get going. And as people do it and they like it, they don't like it, they're going to, like Aaron has said, they're going to ask, hey, could we do this? Could we do that? So just get going, and don't be afraid to cut programs that are irrelevant or not desired any longer. So we brought in our first nutritionist, kind of went by the wayside. She actually left on her own, but people did not really care for what her style, because she had kind of a very set piece, one size fits all type of style that was very good for healthy living. But when folks, if Aaron wants to put on 10 pounds of muscle next year, her advice wasn't going to help him with that. Or if I want to lose 10 pounds of fat, her advice might have helped me with that. But anyway, but the nutritionist that we have on board now, he tailors his programs to your specific goals. You want to lose weight, you have like I talked about, some cyclists, they have a massive ride coming up. Okay, well, here's some nutrition for you to focus your next 2 months of training on that, for that targeted event, or whatever the case may be. So he's been way better received than the first lady was. We've changed things. We used to bring yoga on site, and the challenge that we have is I cannot afford to pay the yoga instructors to show up 6 times a day for 2 or 3 people a shot, right? Because we have shifts that start at 6, 7, 8, 9, and then swing shifts, and then graveyard. Well, when do you schedule something to accommodate the greatest number? So ultimately, what we've done is people can still use our gym, but if they want to use one of our providers, we just send them to their facility. So if you want to go do yoga, go to her facility, show the ID card. She offers 12 classes a day or something. It's just way easier that way to accommodate people's schedules. So, but don't be afraid to change. Don't think you've got to start with one thing and keep it forever and never change. Change, because change is important.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some fiscal questions in there, but I think if you can find an organization that offers a la carte sessions, you probably save a lot more money than blanket, because people ebb and flow in how they go to wellness programs. And so you'll see that it's not being used as much as you would like, and therefore it's not costing as much. Whereas when we were bringing them down, everyone loved yoga. Everyone. Well, our crowds were up to 20 people at a time, and then by the end there was 2 or 3. It was sporadic. So it's really hard to maintain that kind of dedication over a long period.
Yeah, and I think so. Just kind of for those that are listening, like how do we do some of that? We so say for our CrossFit provider, you just walk in, show our ID card, and they bill us for that session. I think it's $15 a session. I don't even know. So you can go 3 times a day and we'll pay for $45 a day for you, or you can go once a week and we'll pay for $15 a week. But that a la carte way, that I think is the best way to do it. It's hard now. It's hard to budget for, right? Because I don't know how is everybody going to go 3 times a day or once a month? I don't know. But so that part is a challenge, but it also then incentivizes the service providers to do kind of their own recruiting and their own marketing, right? Because the more of our folks that show up, the more money they make. So we've kind of struck that as the happy balance. And we do that for all of our services now, for the 2 gyms, the yoga, and I think the price schedule is, I think it's different. I don't even know. But anyway, that's how we do it. So that has worked out very well for us.
Well, it's not surprising that you won the Zero Destination Award for your officer wellness program. We have a lot of interest, and I'm going to open it up now for some questions from that we're receiving from some of our listeners.
Great. Thanks, Jim. We have had a lot of questions, a lot of interest in what you guys are doing. First off, as you were just talking about the providers, Sheriff, how did you approach providers to contract with you?
That's a good question. So we originally, so I talked about Danielle is her name, our athletic trainer. I'd actually been referred to her. I have all sorts of aches and pains like most people in this profession, especially when you come out of the military and play contact sports your whole life, whatever. My story is not unique. But I was actually referred to Danielle by another staff member, by one of my captains. So I'd go see her. She would work on fixing me. And over time, I started some conversations with her, like, why don't you come do this at my office? We'll set it up. She was the first one. What do we have her fidge? 3 to 6 months initially. I don't even remember. As she was here, we started having more conversations with her. She brought in the original CrossFit gym and the original nutritionist kind of as a package deal, kind of for the second iteration. And it was just, at that point, it was kind of word of mouth. So that wasn't like an RFP or something like that. That went out for bid and people gave proposals. It was kind of a word of mouth and like direct conversation piece. The yoga was sort of the same way. I had actually originally approached one lady locally that does yoga, and that kind of fell through. And my wife actually had prior experience with our current yoga provider, so I contacted her. We met once. She was excited. The rest is history. And now what we are seeing is we are getting folks that are reaching out to us, other local gyms that offer either the same thing or different things that they also want to join our program. And so that is, pretty useful. The one piece on that, and this is maybe, I think, a bigger city or a county. Our county is about 1,500 square miles. Not the biggest, not the smallest, but whatever, kind of in the middle. But we, of course, have staff that live all across our county or even out of county. But one of the next iterations is we want to add more yoga studios or more CrossFit gyms, because like our CrossFit gym is kind of way up in the north of our county, and our yoga studio is kind of in the south of our county. Well, that if you live in the south of the county and you want to go to CrossFit, our provider, it's a 30 to 40-minute drive. That's not convenient. So we would like to kind of spread it out around the county. So ideally, there's a provider for our various services within 15 minutes or so of most of our staff.
Right.
So that'll be something for our coordinator whenever he or she, hopefully it's a she, there's one I want, whenever she starts.
Now, you mentioned the nutritionist. Is that a full-time position, or do you contract with services?
All of ours are contract. And so he is here. Do you know how many hours
he's here? He shows up on Wednesdays from roughly like 9 to 3, but he owns an actual nutrition store in Modesto nearby, and all employees can go in there for free, get a free assessment. They even get discounts on supplements, all that stuff. So he's always available.
Yeah.
We've had a few questions relating to two parts. Are officers working out on duty time on their shift? And if they're injured, how are they covered?
Yes, that is always the dilemma. So we do authorize them to work out on duty, and it's sort of it is. I'll just say it clearly, it is not a super specific and clearly defined policy. It's basically, hey, if you want to take your lunch break and go work out, knock yourself out. The expectation of your patrol, you've got your gear handy and you're listening to the radio in case something crazy happens. We have not had to cross the on-duty injury bridge yet. So that was, but on that note, I mean, it'll happen eventually. It is what it is. But I still look at it, and Aaron kind of alluded to some of the stats. I'll happily live with that on-duty injury or workman's comp claim because, you know, in the long run, I believe it will reduce claims overall. That was also, though, when I talked about our incentive, that was one of the ways that we got it, because I don't pay people to work out. I pay them to take a test, right? And so obviously if they get injured taking the test, it's on duty. But it's also, it's not so much that they're getting paid to work out, even though they can work out on duty. There's kind of a nuanced difference there, if that makes sense.
This is kind of a stigma that's been around for a while. It used to be you couldn't work out on duty, but you could go home and eat lunch for 45 minutes. And what were you doing at home? Taking your belt off, taking your shoe off. So why can't I do that in the gym? And I'm actually closer. And I think one thing we didn't talk about was the keys to making a successful program is, you know, each agency has their own administrative process, their red tape, the bureaucracy. And, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. You got to let it go. I mean, if you're always worried about these injuries, you're never going to take that step forward for the positives of what comes from working out on duty. And I can say firsthand, we have 3 or 4 everyday deputies working out for 30 minutes on duty, sergeants, and that was never a thing before. So I can say that in these programs, a lot of administrators are going to want statistics. I want numbers. You can't measure success in this world. And so you can't use that. And another thing that's been really helpful for us is kind of this decentralized authority. I have a lot of informal authority. If you have someone passionate about it and they're able to move the program forward, let them go. And then, you know, keep them in check financially with finance, but let them move along. You know, they haven't stopped me from spending money yet, but they will. But I think it's making the program better. And so, and I can show that statistically. I can show use and improvements as a result of that.
Great. Do your jail staff react differently to any of the elements of the program? Similar participation across the board?
Jail staff?
Yeah.
I would actually say that our jail staff, our custodial staff, probably use more of the programs than our operational staff does. And I don't know. So we have about a dozen facilities across the county, but all of our jail staff, with a couple of exceptions, like half a dozen people, are all on this campus, on our main campus, where the majority of our facilities are. So I don't know if it's a kind of a convenience or a geographic, right? They're co-located with the facilities or the services, but they are actually probably they are our biggest users of the program.
Yeah, I would say it's probably 3 to 1, the jail staff versus the operations staff. One of our unique problems with the sheriff's department is we have, you know, our main office, we have a jail, we have 4 contract cities, we have a courthouse, we have a coroner's office, and everywhere they have these little satellite gyms or satellite groups. And a lot of the people from these satellite locations never show up to this area. If we were a big centralized agency, I think we'd have a much more tangible, visible interaction. So it's really hard to measure. And that also is a problem with the program, because like I'm known for getting equipment for stuff, and then I go to another facility and they're like, hey, can we get some new benches? They've had like benches from like 1970s. And, you know, part of the program is being able to get to everyone and affect everyone rather than just the big central gym. And that's a challenge, not necessarily something that we're successful at.
Next question. How did you go about selecting your mental health specialist counselor that you use?
Yeah, she is our contracted psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever she is. She does all of our pre-employment screenings and is on contract to handle critical incidents as well. She could come out for a hostage situation if need be. obviously internally any kind of critical incident. So she is pre-existing. That is not something, thankfully, that we've had to go back out to, and she is generally pretty well regarded within the organization. And then our peer support team is all our employees. You know, they could be a captain, a lieutenant, a deputy, a civilian staff, right? They're male, female. It's a fairly large team. We provide them with training. And that is a voluntary basis. We let, people have to have an interest and volunteer for it, but yeah, so I don't know that we've ever actually excluded anybody from that team if they want to join it. I don't actually know the answer to that. No.
A question about confidentiality. If a deputy wants to seek help, or for a mental or physical issue, do they have an option without it getting back to administration? What's the confidentiality you guys have in place?
Yeah, it is very, very confidential is probably the only way I can say. And I did kind of allude to that earlier because there is a certain stigma that they think, oh, if I go seek help, it's going to get back and it's going to end up in my file. No, nothing could be further from the truth. Like the only way that I know if someone uses any of our services is if they tell me. Or like if I'm going to see Danielle, our athletic trainer, right? And I'm waiting for my appointment and Aaron walks out. Well, obviously I know he was in there. Or when I walk out, they know I'm in there. But we do not collect any data on that. Obviously, if you go say to CrossFit or to something that we have to pay for, we do know, that 14 people attended last week. But we don't track names. We don't do any of that. We have no interest in that. The only way that we will know something is if, our mythical Deputy Smith comes in either through his union or his sergeant or something, and they come to us and say, hey, Smith has a problem and would like to get some help, treatment, assistance, whatever. Can we send him off for a week to something? The answer to that is always yes, we will do that. Obviously, I know then that Smith has some issue, but sometimes we don't even know what it is, right? We might be able to theorize, oh, we think it's alcohol or whatever, but we don't ask, we don't care. We just want to ship them off, or they can go do it straight through HR. They don't tell us at all, other than the fact that, hey, we need Smith to be off for, off the schedule for a week or whatnot. I think our record is a 30-day program that we have shipped someone off to. And so, but we actually support that. We would rather that someone come and tell us that they have a problem so that we can kind of proactively address it than, deal with it down the road in some negative aspect because something has happened.
Great. This is probably a question for you, Aaron. What are some ideas that can be used to get officers to want to be more active and in good physical health?
Competition and camaraderie are some of the things that I think are important. I wouldn't say call it cheerleading, but I don't really have an issue with anyone. I'm very open and I try to encourage people, and having the right people in that position to be open and encouraging is important, because I do think there are a lot of people afraid to get involved. I think there are employees who don't want to come to gym because there's a bunch of iron heads slamming weights and got the shirts off, and it's kind of intimidating. And I think therein lies my challenge. I'm not really sure how to get that going. I think that I could encourage people to go out and try, but like I said, I don't think my success rate would be 100%. I think my goal is to get to 100%. And I don't know, you got to find the key players that can motivate people, or find out what motivates that person, what motivates you. And then there's a lot of people that will realize they have the problem, but they don't care. Like we have this $1,000 wellness incentive if you can do the SWAT qualification, and I have 4 subordinates in my specialty team. None of them are SWAT members, and I tell them they can work out on duty. I say you can go on your last hour at working on duty, and they would rather work 1 or 2 overtime shifts than go and train to get the $1,000 incentive. And that's just a mindset that I have not been able to topple, and I don't know if I can. And that's where I lie dwelling in that problem. And it really just depends on how well you know the crowd that you're targeting and who's your really good charismatic person. You know, who do they want to follow? Who's that informal leader that they like and follow and admire? And, you know, this is obviously a voluntary perspective rather than a mandatory perspective. I think there could be a mandatory perspective that would be very impactful or successful, but you know, a lot of people don't like being told what to do. You know, you have the unions involved, and that may cause hardship. But I do think in some terms that may be more effective in the long term. Like, you don't have a choice. This entire squad will go to the gym for an hour. I don't care what you do. We haven't gotten to that point, but I do think that could be effective. Now, how much morale is crushed by that, I'm not sure yet. Sorry,
we've had a lot of questions about whether you can give an estimate for the annual cost for the program, Sheriff, or components of the program at least.
I have absolutely no idea. I literally have never asked. It's several $1,000s. My guess is we're not up to 100 grand yet, but we're probably pushing it for our various contracts. It's just one of those things that, you know, my business manager is wonderful, and she can make all sorts of magic happen. And so she makes it happen in our budget. And we've never had to have a conversation about, oh boy, that's getting too pricey, we need to tone it down. We do try to make sure, though, that what we offer is at least getting some level of use. So that is part of it as well. But I have no idea.
What's the total personnel there?
We have 850 full-time, and then about 150 part-time or contractors. So we're right at about 1,000 total.
Okay, that makes sense. Per capita.
Yeah. If you look at our incentive pay for doing the qualification, I think we had close to 150 our first year. And if they only did the $500, that's $75,000. So I mean, you have a cap, like the worst case scenario. I would say you could do that. So this is the exact, you know, the high spend on this program. But I can tell you, as long as it's voluntary, your numbers are always going to dwindle and fluctuate, probably in the lower, probably 20 percentile of total employees. It just, this kind of seems about what participation rate is. I can tell you equipment's expensive, but, and I've got a bunch of strategies if anyone wants to reach out about it, how to get more bang for your buck, but you're looking at probably $10,000 to $20,000 in actual equipment to get something really effective started. That we have quite a lot of equipment, quite a big gym that's expanded over many years. So it's a little bit different in that regard.
I know for any California agencies too, I think every agency just got a grant through BSCC. Ours is like 370 grand, and I'm told it's going to be an ongoing grant that comes actually with very few strings attached to it, shockingly enough. So anyway, that's just kind of money for us to spend on wellness. So I don't know about other states, but I do know that in California, we just got that, and they do expect to continue. The anticipation is that they will continue that grant into perpetuity. So we'll see.
That's fantastic. Advice for smaller agencies. Somebody asks, we don't have the resources for a program, but could we pay per diem usage with a larger agency? Do you have any experience with that with your wellness program?
That's an interesting, so like a smaller agency paying a larger agency to join them, right, is kind of how I'm interpreting that. We actually explored that here, both our district attorney's office and actually our public defender, who we actually have a pretty good relationship with. They both wanted to join our program. As it turns out, they're going to just do their own contracts, but it's going to be kind of that same model where it's kind of a pay to play kind of thing. So I think my recommendation to a small agency would be just reach out to local providers and see if you can pay them on a per session, per use basis. Like I said, I think we pay $15 per session for CrossFit. And you know, you could cap it, you know, if you have a limited budget, say you can only spend, I don't know, $5,000 on it. Well, you could potentially say we'll pay for it until we hit our cap. But that, I think, is the best solution, because that way you are only paying for those that use it, and it incentivizes those providers to market, encourage, whatever, attract more. we would certainly be open, I know, to any of our smaller agencies in our county to joining us, because the truth is you do get economy of scale, kind of group discounts or bulk rate. We just have not, that has not happened for us yet. Like I said, DA and public defender were going to, but ended up going their own contract route.
I would also say if you have a larger facility, like a larger gym group corporation, and you go in there and you actually talk to management, you could probably come up with some kind of package deal, because obviously corporations and taxes and donations of services to like associations, you could probably come up with a way to get a fairly inexpensive service provided that benefits the corporation. Because you really look at the numbers, unless you have everyone attending, it's really not going to strap that gym too hard in terms of financial loss. I mean, they're not going to get any money anyways unless you sign up. So I think it's in their interest to do it. But you got to try. Once again, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah.
Erin, you talked about some of the new science around wellness. Do you guys have a mindfulness component, tactical breathing, meditation to your wellness program?
Yes, tactical breathing's been around for a while. I know there's the book by Lieutenant Grossman on combat, and so tactical breathing is kind of one of those cultural things, so that you want passed off, and we do it a lot in our training about it. So that's kind of been around for a minute. But in terms of mindfulness, we've dabbled in that, but that's also even harder to really target and get adherence from the audience in terms of practice and that's one of those things where it's on you to do in your own time, and when no one's around, are you really going to do it? It's pretty hard. Now, the yoga was very mindfulness centric, but then again, there was also, I noticed an issue is a lot of the more masculine deputies didn't want to be seen out on the mats with the yoga, so it creates another issue. It's a challenge, right? Some guys would never do yoga, and I was trying to get them out on the mats, and they refused. And that's a challenge you're going to have to face if you try to do that. I know there are places I've heard where you can get, through your medical insurance, you can get the Calm app for free. And the Calm app has mindfulness and breathing. And those are options you could probably look into and I'm sure there's a million apps you could probably get a group discount on to use, or free.
Great advice.
I don't think we've talked about this. We also have the Cortico app, which I think a lot of agencies use, and I'm 99% certain there's some mindfulness stuff in that. It's been a while since I've been into that app, but yeah, so some of that is out there.
Great. We are nearly out of time. We do have a lot of other questions which we will address afterwards, and we will post with the show notes. My last question is for you, Sheriff. Engagement was mentioned as a way to measure success. What other metrics do you look at to measure the success of your wellness program?
Yeah, the only real metric that we have applied so far is participation. Basically the participation rates. That is the one thing that we've done, and some of that, it was actually a conversation. I interviewed a potential coordinator yesterday, and we actually talked about that, of getting, assuming it's her, to kind of help develop some metrics, but how, and Erin talked about, if we're at 20%, how do we go to 25? If we're at 25, how do we get to 30? So the participation is one, but then those longer term metrics of, are we truly seeing the payoff in a lack of OJIs? Are we seeing fewer, I'll just broadly say, mental health related issues that are coming to us, through into that make their way into an IA, complaint or something. So we don't have strong metrics right now beyond participation, but that is absolutely something that we need to work on more. But what I would also say to any agency that wants to start, don't get wrapped up with your metrics, just start, because doing something is better than doing nothing.
Great advice. Back to you, Jim, to wrap it up.
All right, thanks. Sheriff Dirkse, thank you for your service. Your complete bio is in our show notes. You're doing a great job for the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department with your award-winning wellness program. Thanks for sitting in with us today.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, we have a great team, so they do great work. So thank you.
Yep, and Erin, appreciate your comments, and your insight. I know you're going to give us a link to some data on the success of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in agencies. Look forward to seeing that.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right, you've been listening to How to Build and Sustain an Effective Officer Wellness Program, Policing Matters Special. And hey, drop us a line. Let us know what you think about today's show, what you'd like to see. Drop us a line at policingmatters@policeone.com, policingmatters@policeone.com. And hey, look for our next webinar on strategies to prevent school shootings. We've got some great guests there as well. All right, stay safe. Hey, check us out on Apple, SoundCloud, whatever. We're out there. Rate us if you can. We appreciate it. Hey, be safe. Take good care. Talk to you soon.